these are eternal truths, really, really deep, that has been hidden from humanity for millennia. This is what they don't want you to know. The real law of attraction and how to apply it in your life. Many people will be familiar with the New Age variants of the so-called law or laws of attraction. And this is going to differ quite widely from what people have heard in the New Age community, in the New Age movement regarding what the law or laws of attraction are. These are the real laws of attraction you're going to be hearing today and hopefully understanding today. Human beings everywhere say that they want certain things in their life. And they say that they want certain things to be present for all humanity. We say we want certain conditions to be present for ourselves and our species as a whole. And we say we want things such as happiness, health, peace, prosperity, freedom, etc. And all these things are great things to aspire to. And we say we want them. Most people will say and tell you we want these things. There are requirements for obtaining the conditions that we say we want. Requirement exists in nature. It does exist. If you want something to be different than the way that it already is, than the default conditions, then requirement exists. If you're okay with things being the way that they are now, requirement doesn't exist. There are no requirements to creating change. You just accept the default conditions the way they are now and go on with your existence and accept it's going to be this way and possibly get worse. But if you want real change to happen, requirements exist. And this is what many New Age teachers will not tell you, or they'll outright deny that requirements exist for creating real change. Specific requirements exist in order for human beings to obtain the conditions that they say they want. If the requirements for obtaining those conditions are not met, those conditions do not just magically manifest by magical means automatically. That's not how it works. This is a key concept to understand. We need to know certain things. Knowledge is required. Knowledge. Knowledge that will spur us to action. That's what's required. This knowledge is occulted, meaning hidden. But what you have to understand right off the bat is that the word occult, it's simply derived from Latin, the Latin adjective occultus. Occultus in Latin means hidden, hidden from sight. The information regarding natural law is occulted knowledge. It is knowledge that has been hidden from humanity. It's held by the few, which is represented here at the top of this pyramid. You can look at this as a pyramid representing knowledge or ignorance. At the top of the pyramid, you have knowledge. The higher you go in the pyramid, the more knowledge. But the pyramid tapers because at the top, very few people understand that information. Down here, you have no knowledge, the ignorant masses. What is this occulted knowledge? Occult knowledge constitutes two things. There's two general bodies of occult knowledge. In the actual mystery traditions and in occult schools, they talk about these as arcana, A-R-C-A-N-A. The word arcana is also Latin. It means knowledge. It means it's dealing with the individual units of consciousness, the human psyche. The first major body of occult knowledge constitutes knowledge of human consciousness, how it works, how it operates, what our motivations are. The second body of occult knowledge is called the greater arcana or the major arcana. And what these natural laws are unseen and universal spiritual laws which govern the consequences of behavior for intelligent species, for beings that are capable of coming to their understanding. It's been called karma, karmic law, in many Middle Eastern and Eastern traditions. It has been called in some of the Western traditions and Christian traditions moral law. Religionists have called it God's law. Why is this knowledge hidden away from people? And there's a reason for that. In order to create and maintain a power differential. They know how something works, like how human consciousness works, how human motivations work, how human perceptions work, how human beings can be manipulated. This is the thing that all the distractions are there for, to keep you from learning. The endless trivialities, the nonsense you hear on the news, all the video games, all the nonsense television. It's all there to keep people from understanding this. Truth versus human perception. See these white lines? Imagine these white lines that do not waver as truth. And imagine that the perception that is set against the truth, we're going to take three different individuals. This is individual A, this is individual B, this is individual C. Their ability to perceive what has occurred and what is occurring is what I would refer to as consciousness. If your consciousness is high, meaning it's at a high frequency, that means you're going to have more of an ability to understand and recognize the patterns. If your consciousness is low, you're at a low frequency, you're going to see the pattern less. The longer the wavelength, the shorter the frequency. What that means is how frequently is it going to be intercepting the line that represents truth. The higher the frequency, the more in tune with truth we are. What would happen if this frequency became infinitely high? It would be indistinguishable from a line. And therefore, someone would be aligned to that which is their perception of reality being accurate. Think about this in sound, right? You hear a low bass tone, it's like, then it goes up, and it would go eventually outside the range of human hearing because the frequency went so high. Same concept here. The higher the frequency, the higher the perception of reality, the quality of the perception is going to be. The concept to keep in mind here is perception is not reality. It's the filter we see reality through. Down here is the reptilian brain. It's comprised of the brain stem right here, and this part of the brain is called the cerebellum. These two components together essentially comprise the R complex. The R complex is the lowest consciousness part of the brain. We don't do any thinking with this part of the brain. It's the reactive part of the brain. It reacts to stimulus. It's the stimulus response mechanism. In this middle part of the brain, these are all the different glands like the hypothalamus, the thalamus, the pituitary and pineal glands, etc., that comprise the midbrain or the limbic system. All human emotions are facilitated, are made possible by this part of the brain. The neocortex is the outer casing, basically, of the telencephalon, the higher brain. What you have to understand about the telencephalon, or the hemispheres of the brain, is that they're, first of all, bilaterally symmetrical, and they generally control different functions of thought. But in general, the left hemisphere of the brain is what governs logic, analytical thought, and scientific and mathematical thinking, and also linear thought processes. The right side of the brain, the right hemisphere, governs or generally facilitates and makes possible human creativity, all the emotional dynamics of the human being, holistic thought, being able to see the big picture thinking, pattern recognition, and then things like compassion, nurturing, care. Now, if this left part of the brain becomes chronically dominant, the masculine part of the brain, and I'm putting these symbols here. This is an ancient archetypal symbol called the blade. It's a simple upward pointing triangle. And this downward pointing triangle is another ancient archetypal symbol that was referred to in the ancient world as the chalice, the cup, etc. Okay? And this was a rudimentary phallic symbol, and this was a rudimentary womb symbol, representing the male and the female. The idea is to keep a balance between these two. When we have a balance between the two, that's when we're operating on all cylinders, so to speak. That's when real consciousness and pattern recognition is developed. And that's when real morality and ethical considerations are also created within the personality, within the being. People have equated intelligence with intellect, especially in the Western society. All right? Intellect is not intelligence. Intelligence comprises more than intellect. Intellect is left brain understanding. True intelligence is holistic understanding, with the right brain included in the process, the nurturing, compassionate, creative, and intuitive sides of the consciousness together with the intellectual aspect of the consciousness. And you can see this in the word. intelligence, right? Intelle is where intellect comes from, okay? And gens, G-E-N-C-E, comes from the Latin verb generare. Generare means to generate or to create. So it's the creative aspect of the personality, or the right brain. So intellect plus creativity, logical thinking plus nurturing and compassion. That's real intelligence, holistic intelligence. And most people in our society are not in holistic intelligence. They're in one form of brain imbalance or the other. If a human left brain hemisphere becomes chronically dominant, the R complex will take over executive function of the brain, and the person will become ruled by selfishness and base desires. And they will develop a personality that is based in domination and control. Conversely, if a human being's right brain hemisphere becomes chronically dominant, the limbic system will take over executive function of the whole brain, and the person will become ruled by their own emotions and develop a personality that is based in submissiveness and naivete. The general principles of natural law. Natural law is expressed through 7 basic underlying principles, plus what I have referred to as an 8th or hidden principle, which you hear very few other researchers, even people who are studying this from the occult perspective, who are studying this from the consequentialism perspective, you very hear them incorporate the 8th and all-encompassing principle. This 8th principle, which I call the lost principle, binds all the other 7 principles together. These principles together constitute a master key through which universal wisdom, including the knowledge of the requirements to obtaining what we desire, is then unveiled or de-occulted. These are the 7 general principles of natural law: mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. The principle of mentalism states that the all, everything in creation, is actually a manifestation of mind. The principle of correspondence states that that which is above is similar or like to that which is below. So what this means is, it's a mirror, okay? The above is like the below is like the above. The principle of vibration simply states that there is no such thing as rest. Everything vibrates, and at the most fundamental level, the universe and every single thing which comprises it is ultimately pure vibratory energy that is manifesting itself in different ways, different frequencies, different vibratory forms. The principle of polarity states that everything has a dual nature to it. There are polarities in everything that exists. Okay? Everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. However, opposites, they are identical in nature, but they're different in degree. The principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. Everything has a rhythm to it or a swing to it. There's tendencies that exist in energy. The pendulum swing manifests in everything that we undergo, everything that we perceive. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. It's just an opposite. It's perceived as an opposite. Rhythm will compensate. This is the principle here in natural law that most fits in with how I'm using the term natural law today, cause and effect. So the principle of cause and effect simply states that every cause has its effect and every effect has its cause. Every single thing that occurs happens according to law. Chance is a name for a law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. You cannot change the past. You can change what it is starting now and make sure that it gets changed in the future. But right now, what is the truth, and all you could do is accept that or reject it. The final principle of the 7 principles of natural law are gender. Again, I'm going to talk about an 8th lost one. Gender exists in everything. Everything has its masculine and its feminine components or principles. We've already seen that when it comes to the human brain, consciousness, worldview, etc. Gender manifests on all planes of existence: spiritual, mental, physical, everything. This next section is what I call the lost principle. This is the 8th principle of natural law, which binds all of the other principles together. It's the container inside which all the other principles fit very nicely and neatly. However, it's lost because we're not exercising it. See, we already looked at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 principles of natural law. And there they are represented by these circles overlapping each other. Here's the 8th circle, the seed of life. Now, what happens from a seed? It grows. It generates something. It creates something. Here's what that principle is. It's the 8th or the lost principle. And it's the thing that has to be present in order for any change to manifest itself. Here's what the 8th principle is. It is known as the generative principle, or the principle which governs creation, which actually is the causal factor that goes into effect and generates the result that we say that we want. But what's the real term for it? Now, most people will say it's love. The generative principle is care. This is different than compassion. People say, why don't you use the word compassion? Because that's not what I'm talking about. It is a different concept than compassion, or even what I would describe as love. This means, what are you giving attention and helping to grow? What are you focusing upon? Because what you're focusing upon, that's what's ultimately getting generated, getting created, and growing. And this doesn't mean be ignorant of what's going on in the world and don't look at anything that's negative because you're going to feed that and give power to it. That's not what it means. That means, you know what you're feeding? In that instance, if you want to do that, you're feeding ignorance. And that's what's going to grow. It's the exact opposite that the New Agers want you to believe that it is. By ignoring the negative, you are ensuring that more of it occurs. You are fueling it by ignorance. This is what you're giving your energy to. This is what you're focused upon. This is what you actually care enough about to do, to spend your time on, to put your attention on, to manifest in the world. That's what I'm talking about as care. That's what generates our experience in the aggregate. Most people don't care about what's really happening. Therefore, it is an impossibility for us in the aggregate to change the direction of energy, to change the direction of consciousness, and ultimately to get what we say we want. That's how the real law of attraction works. Here's how it actually operates. The lost principle is the dynamic of care. What we care about on a day-to-day basis acts as the driving force of our thoughts and actions. What did I say we need to develop? The heart, mind, guts, right? Heart, mind, guts, in that order. Care comes first. You got to care enough to know, to develop the knowledge, okay? Then you got to act on it and put it into practice. Apply it. So that's the order. Heart, mind, guts. Care, knowledge, action. Those are the steps. And all three of those have to be in place. That's what unity consciousness is. It's unifying thoughts, emotions, and actions. The three aspects of consciousness, such that there is no contradiction between them. Our thoughts, what we say, what we think, how we feel, and how we act are one and the same. There's no contradiction. That's unity consciousness. Therefore, care is the driver of our thoughts and actions. It ultimately can be seen as the generator of the quality of our shared experience here on the earth. Care is what generates the whole thing. Hence, it has been called the generative principle. Liken the heart to a pump in the body. Well, what does a pump do? It's a generator. It provides energy. It moves the life force through the blood in the body. In every ancient tradition, they talk about the life force being in the blood. The heart is what pumps that through the whole physiology and enables us to continue to sustain life. As important as the brain is, which we just talked about the importance of it, the heart is ultimately what's generating the experience, because what we care about determines what we think about on a daily basis most of the time, and therefore how we behave.